Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. This week in 1906, there was a remarkable heat wave occurring in the eastern United States. The temperature at Waverly, Ohio on January 21st, 1906 reached 78 degrees. Detroit had their third warmest winter day after 1890 and 1876. A few hours later, Western Australia reached their all-time record temperature of 50.7 degrees Celsius at Eucla. Something was going on that caused very warm temperatures on opposite sides of the Earth. A few weeks earlier, on January 6, 1906, Victoria, Australia reached their all-time record temperature of 50.8 degrees Celsius at Mildura. 50.8 degrees Celsius is 124 degrees Fahrenheit, and people were dying from the heat. A few weeks later, there was a terrible tornado outbreak in Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee, which killed more than 100 people. And a few weeks later, San Francisco was destroyed by an earthquake. There was almost nothing left of the city after the earthquake and fire of April 18, 1906. You might ask, what does that have to do with climate? In 1905, a French astronomer, Abbé Moreau, used sunspots to predict earthquakes. He had successfully predicted a devastating earthquake in India and said there is a connection between solar activity and volcanoes and even earthquakes. And he said that it was highly probable that earthquakes would occur in March or April of 1906. Moreau said terrestrial disturbances are due to solar activity. Perhaps it's a coincidence, but he made a very specific prediction for an earthquake in April 1906, and that occurred at San Francisco. Also in 1905, Mildura, Victoria reached 122.5 degrees, which was almost as hot as it reached in January 1906. So let's take a look at what governments have done to all of this remarkable science. In 1995, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology reported that the peak temperature in New South Wales occurred at Bourke on January 17, 1877, when they reached 52.8 degrees Celsius. As I already mentioned, the record temperature in Victoria occurred in 1906. In Western Australia was 1906, and in Queensland the hottest temperature ever recorded in Australia was on January 16, 1889, when they reached 53.1 degrees Celsius. But the Bureau of Meteorology has since erased all temperatures prior to 1910, and now they report much cooler record maximum temperatures in those states. The Australian government has erased Australia's hot past since 1995 when this was published. The Australian government no longer reports the very hot weather which occurred in Australia prior to the year 1910. In 1952, CSIRO published this paper, Climatic Change in Australia Since 1880. They showed that Australia was much hotter during the 19th century and that temperatures cooled quite a bit. But reality did not suit the Australian government's global warming agenda, so they erased all of the hot temperatures prior to 1910. The hottest month in Southeast Australia was January 1896, which the New York Times described as the hottest of hot waves on record. They said Adelaide got up to 127 degrees in the shade. During the summer of 1896, New York had a 10-day heat wave which killed nearly 1,500 people. And there was a global heat wave and drought which killed almost 20 million people in India and 10 million people in China. Reality destroys the global warming agenda, which is why governments are so intent on making sure that people don't deal with reality. The U.S. government takes a slightly different approach to hiding the heat of the past. Rather than erasing the data, they just change it. In 1999, NASA showed the United States cooling from the 1930s through the end of the 20th century, with the two hottest years being 1934 and 1921. But NASA has since altered the data to turn a cooling trend into a warming trend. And they made the record heat of 1934 and 1921 largely disappear. They can erase the heat of 1921 from people's memories, but that won't bring back the people who died in 1921's record heat wave around much of the world. Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this massive scam for the past 15 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki Upla, and the 4 new puppies on the web at realclimatescience.com.